So I do kind of want to start by saying our names because I keep assuming that people know who we are. Because I just kind of don't expect
everybody knows.
I expect
us.
people. I don't expect like strangers to listen to this. So when strangers do listen to this, I'm like, huh, that is true. We are putting this out completely in the internet, like for anyone to hear.
Yeah.
But it's
and I think especially doing our first video, YouTube. These are our faces. I'm Emily. This is my voice.
I'm Sarah. This is my raspy voice, which I sometimes get rid of the rasp. That's my thing.
It's I love it.
But yeah, I've been also thinking a lot about, because one of the last podcasts we recorded was The Mystic and the Scientist. And that was a really interesting one for me because your reaction in that whole podcast was kind of unexpected. And I kind of want to revisit that a little bit, if that's okay.
I think we should, because it surprised me too. Because like when we talked about doing that as a topic, I was like, heck yes, let's do that. And then when we start diving into it, I was like, I had like all of this like resistance and like all this stuff like show up out of nowhere. And it definitely caught me off guard. I know. Too.
It was so funny because, and like, this is going to be the fun thing about trying to like maybe start doing video is it was really interesting because I could see it on your face, but it wasn't something that I think people could necessarily hear. Right. So I'm sitting here like watching you because I know you so well. And I'm like, she is like definitely like digging her heels in a little bit, which is funny because when we talked about, we're going to do The Mystic and the Scientist because it'll be fun to talk about how we're so different in this way where I'm very much like, and you're very much like, we'll explore things like past lives and crystals and things like that. And I love it about you. But then when I started to like, I guess maybe even like label you as like the mystic, you were like, yeah, well, I don't really like believe in any of this shit. And I was like,
I don't actually subscribe to any of this. It's so funny because also this is like classic Enneagram 4, right? The Enneagram 4 is the individualist and we don't like being labeled actually. So that paired with my aversion to subscribing to any type of belief system based on like my religious abuse, it like came out in this like really weird way. And it's so interesting because like when me and you are just shooting the shit or I'm hanging out with friends, you know, I don't actually like have that resistance. Like I don't care.
I've never
so much
seen it.
Because I feel, but then, but then like for whatever reason, putting it out there to the world, I had this like thing come out of me of like, I don't want the world to label me as
like
thing.
Okay.
Even though if I were to literally pick a label for myself, if I were literally to choose, that's what I would probably choose, you know? But it was just really bizarre, like having all this weird subconscious stuff like creeping up right in the middle of the podcast.
I know. It was so funny. And it's also kind of plays into like something I've been thinking about a lot, which is paradoxical relationships. I want to like touch on that. I just kind of, I don't know why I'm obsessed with this, but I think because it's helped me understand myself so much. It's just like the whole idea of how we really like our personality is contextual is another way of thinking about it. And how when we show up in the world, it really is so much of what we like choose to show is a like reflection of who's like directly in front of us. And so, because I think that that's really funny because when it's just the two of us, you know, I think if we had that conversation and it wasn't going to be like put out to the world, you would have been like, yeah. I'm the like,
here's all the weird stuff I've been thinking about. Yeah. And I just like it's true. I think if it was just you and I would have been like, oh, and then there's this, and then there's this and that. And I just like had this, like, I like dug my heels in.
You were like, I was like, no. And it made it really funny for me to navigate because as we're recording, I'm like, what is happening?
You were like,
I was like, I know. Because I would say something and you would kind of be like, no. And I was like, oh, okay. My entire reality is like kind of crumbling right now. I mean, it wasn't that dramatic, but it was very funny because I was just like, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. Like I've been thinking about it nonstop. I'm like, what? That whole podcast was so interesting to me because it definitely like kicked up so many like unique things. And it is all, I think, very much based in this idea that we present different parts of ourselves depending on who is like present. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I think I definitely, like, I think in thinking about it, I realized that part of me, that like experimental, mystical, thinking outside of the box is actually like a really intimate part of me. I think so when I like share that with you, I think it's like an intimate thing where I feel safe in our relationship. And so I can say really crazy shit because I know that you love me and that you're going to laugh with me and hear what I have to say. And then I think like on a public platform, I like had this, it was this whole other thing of like, I don't know if I feel like I want to like be that vulnerable or like, I don't know. It was interesting, but I thought it was funny ultimately.
I thought it was hilarious.
And I think it did like spur a lot of like really interesting like thought processes for me and like what I actually think about all of that and where that comes from.
Yeah.
But I do think that your whole like, this whole idea of like paradox in relationship is something that we all experience. A lot of us experience pain because of it. And a lot of us actually experience a lot of judgment towards each other, I think, because of it. But it's something we all participate in.
So let's maybe like talk a little bit about what that is.
Break it down.
Because it's something I'm kind of obsessed with lately. Like when we were talking about what to talk about on today's podcast, the question we always ask is like, what are we thinking about a lot? And I feel like this has been something I've been thinking about for the last year because it's helped me so much. And so really like, well, one, personality is contextual is one way of thinking about it. I think that's like step one almost, where you're like, yes, when I show up in front of my parents, I show different parts of myself. When I show up in front of my romantic partner, I show different parts of myself. When I show up with you, maybe slightly different. And then ultimately, I think coming to a place where you feel better in life, at least for me, it's been extremely important to surround myself with more people who I can show more of myself. Being around people who, I don't know, I can be frustrated or just like say things that are half-baked ideas, which is really what we want this podcast to be, right? We're trying to really talk about things that are not fully formed ideas. And they're things that we're kind of grappling with like right now. And I think that's so good because one, that's like where real growth and change happens for me anyway, is like in having conversations that are like not fully formed. Anyway, so going back to the like personality is contextual, but then there's the whole idea of like paradoxical relationships, meaning that and actually like, please jump in at any point because I love how you explain things. I feel like you're actually better than me in explaining things sometimes, but paradoxical relationships is just the idea that we show parts of ourselves. I'm going to use a romantic partner. Like I show parts of myself with Ben based on what he brings to the relationship, right? So a easy example to kind of like give this some like legs is that I am the adventurous one. I am spontaneous. I'm the one who like plans like trips and just spontaneous adventures. And he is the more like methodical one who's like, well, I don't know, like when we got Loki, I was like, let's get a dog. And I would have gotten any dog. But Ben was like, let's think about the kind of dog we want. I would like one that doesn't shed. I would like one that's about this, like weighs this much. And I've had 2 dogs as an adult, never did any of that thinking. And so it's the idea that like we pair really well together. And I tend to get maybe even frustrated with him because I feel like he's not as like fun or spontaneous. I'm like, oh, come on, just like go for it. But it really like gives me a place to explore that side of me more freely because I do know and see the value in the fact that like we thought really hard about what kind of dog we wanted, or we thought, we'll think like more carefully about where we want to go on a trip and what we want out of it. And that has been like a really nice addition to like my life, is his way of being just more methodical, more like, just thinking things through basically. And the thing is in this concept of like paradoxical relationships, he gives me the freedom to be more spontaneous, to be more like, let's just try this thing out, because I have a sense of safety from his way of going about things. And the other part of this all is that obviously he values in me this like spontaneity, this adventurous. And so I tend to label him as not adventurous. And he often is like stop, like, I am adventurous. Just because I don't seek it out in the way that you seek it out doesn't mean that I'm not adventurous. And he's absolutely right. And it's just, so it's this whole idea of like, we show different parts of ourselves depending on what parts our partners are showing or our friends, like our best, we do the same thing. We could talk about that and how that looks and how knowing that makes me less frustrated with him. Because I'm not like, oh, he's a stick in the mud. Oh, he's boring. Oh, he's like, which is honestly what I did think when we first started dating, because I was kind of unaware of this dynamic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it was like a big concern of mine. I would call you and be like, I don't know.
It was.
I don't know this is going to work out.
This whole idea of paradox within relationship is really exciting because it is the thing that kind of like you touch on how complex people are and how complex we are in relationships. And what we try to do to make sense of things is we put people in boxes. Like we fit people into these categories to make it make sense, but people don't actually fit in any of these categories because nobody is 100% perfectly adventurous or 100% like a stick in the mud. Like we actually embody all of it. And then when we engage in relationships, and that's the paradox, is it's the whole idea of both and. It's like, you are more adventurous, but Ben is also adventurous. And sometimes he can be like more methodical and maybe move a little bit more calculated. And it's like, it's all the things. And that's the paradox, right? And so both of us had listened to a Brene Brown and Esther Perel conversation on this topic, which
it was only
I
like 10 minutes
so much.
in their conversation. It's in Brene Brown.
In one of the, I can't remember what the podcast name was, but it was
Brene
brilliant.
Brown's podcast. And it's like,
her podcast, and she was interviewing
and
Esther,
it's 39 minutes in because there's only one of them so people can find it. And actually the reason we listen to it is because we have been talking about this, Ben and I, in therapy with our therapist. We've been talking about this so much. And he was the one who was like, I think you need to listen to this 10-minute segment of this podcast because they do a really good job of like kind of explaining this. And the thing is it's complex because it's nuanced and it's so different and it's ever changing. So it's also talking about how dynamic we are within relationships, which I love because it's so true. Yeah. And ultimately what our therapist was trying to tell us is that the main thing is that you stay flexible and aware and trying to be aware of this, because if you stay flexible and aware of this, then you even can have conversations like, I just am like so excited about the idea of being able to look at like my friends or my family or Ben and just be like, you know, something I've noticed in our friendship is like, I tend to express like this side of myself more. And like, I kind of would like to express another side of myself because that does exist. And I don't have the not that I don't have the opportunity, but like, I just want to tell you that I'm working on this and being more intentional in this way. And I just like love the idea of being able to say that to friends and family. Like, but you have to have this understanding first, right? So I'm all fired up.
I know. I love it. Like, so this idea of, and it's something we've talked about before though, but like being comfortable holding contradictory beliefs, right? And then it can even be about like how you show up in the world. Like sometimes maybe I like this example of being adventurous though. Maybe it's like sometimes, and there's other times that maybe you're feeling like staying put. I don't know for you though.
I think the perfect example of that is like when we went to Italy recently. It was so nice. It was so nice. I just let Ben take the lead. And once he knew we were going to Italy and he was there, like the thing is, this is the thing that I'm realizing about Ben. He's probably not going to be like, hey, in June, let's go to Italy. Because he really likes to do things how he feels about them, like in the moment. So like, but you can't really do that when you're planning an international trip. You have to say, we're going to book a flight on this day.
Forethought.
So what I've come to do with Ben is I just buy tickets to things. Like if there's like a concert I want to go to or a show, I just buy tickets because I have to buy tickets or they sell out. But if I ask him right now, do you want to go to a concert in November of like 8 months from here? He's like, what? No, I don't know. I can't possibly know what I want to do. But when we go, once we're there and we're in the trip, he was like, oh, we're going to go see this museum, and I hired a tour, and we're going to go here, and then let's go to like this little village. And oh, look at this Airbnb I found. Like, should I book it? And I'm like, this is the most amazing Airbnb I've ever seen. Like, and he just,
so he's like really present when he's there. Like when he's in it, he's like really present.
And that was the thing, is he planned so much. And I told him, I was like, do you know how nice it is to not plan everything? Because I've always been the planner. Always, always, always. And releasing that side and like having full faith in him to plan was like, it was like as good as sex.
Yeah.
It really was. Like, I was just like, oh my God, this is so nice. Anyway.
So like, okay, this is another thing I want to get your thoughts on in regards to paradox within relationships, is how we attract relationships, friendships, and people that fit. There's layers, I think. One layer is it fits your trauma, right? So like you will attract relationships, friendships that reinforce the trauma that you've experienced because that's what's familiar and comfortable, right? And so
I think only if you're unaware of your trauma.
That's why I said these are layers. This is like base level, unaware of your relationships. You're replaying your trauma.
Of the fact that you subconsciously seek out relationships to kind of recreate
that reinforce
even the like the chemical, like, because we get addicted to like our own like chemical like signature cocktail of like, for me it's like high beta stress, like fight or flight. I like love to have just like pure chaos when I'm getting out the door. Like when I'm looking for my keys and we're trying to go somewhere, it's just like chaos. And like I get full blown high beta. And the thing is like for years I was addicted to that. Like that's why I liked event planning so much. Cause it's just like you're in like high beta for like 3 days. And then I would have like drug come down, like just being like so depressed. But yeah, so when you're unaware of it, yes, you seek out those relationships.
Right. And then
like you seek out dramatic relationships. I absolutely did that.
Yeah, because it fits your narrative. This is the story that you're participating in, and you need the characters that you're familiar with and that fits within that narrative. And then when you're evolving and growing as a human, becoming aware of these stories and your trauma, or just like older, I think what you can start then attracting are people that have qualities which you are longing to have in yourself, right? So you're attracted to, let's use you and Ben maybe in this example, or we could even use you and I, like,
yeah, I was going to say, let's switch to you and me.
Because I think that there's these qualities that, has been made apparent in this podcast that we have like opposing approaches to things, but I so admire like your viewpoint, and I so admire that. And it's actually like, and we've talked about how like you embody more of like a masculine energy and I embody more of a feminine. And for me, it's been like an actual intentional thing for me to be cultivating my masculine. And so it makes sense that like we are like each other so much, because there's something about you that I admire and want to cultivate in me. But then this is where the whole, I guess it's this term that Esther introduced Brene Brown to, called splitting the ambivalence in relationship, which it's essentially when person one has like a stance on something and they kind of like polarize. It's the opposite of paradox, the both and. It's either or. It polarizes, the splitting the ambivalence. And person one will like say, I, want, or I believe this, or I want this. And their inflexibility in whatever that idea is will force the other person to embody the other half. And so it's kind of like, to touch on what we've already talked about, but like maybe you being like, I'm the adventurous one. And then Ben would automatically be like, well, I'm the more calculated, grounded one, because that's the space that needs to be filled, when the truth of what you guys are realizing is it's both and. You both can embody both of those things. But the interesting thing in this whole idea of splitting the ambivalence is sometimes we do that so much and we're not aware of it that we believe that that is actually our personality. Like I am, this is who I am.
Adventurous.
And when the truth is that you have been filling a role based on these relationships that you're in and like forcing this polarization to happen instead of being flexible and open to the nuances and the paradox that is in relationship.
Ugh, totally. Yeah. And the thing that's crazy about all of this is I think, there are times where I get down on myself that I've that I've had like multiple serious relationships. Like there's a part of me that romanticizes the idea of like marrying your high school sweetheart and like having the same relationship for like 50 years. And so I can get like kind of hard on myself in that way, not as much as I used to, but what I have come to like really know from the like 3 major relationships in my life is that you do I showed up differently in those relationships. I was the calculated one in one of my relationships because he was just like spontaneous as hell. And I would be like, we're going to die. You're so adventurous and spontaneous. If I don't like figure out how to like put some things in place, like we're going to end up in like trouble. Like that's how adventurous he was. He would do things that was like kind of like, in my opinion, reckless. And so I've been the calculated person. Yeah. I've been that person in my relationship. So I know from having these relationships how dynamic, how what we show up is, looks like. And I think that's really interesting also because it's just, for me, I'm always looking for ways to like not be a victim. And this is that, right? Like this whole concept tells you that you at any point in time in your life, in your relationships, have a chance to like, and sometimes it takes separating yourself. Truly. That's why I love traveling. This is why I love traveling. Because anytime I travel and I separate myself from my routine and my life and the people in it, I have a chance to like really look at myself and be like, who am I? What am I like really trying to cultivate within my personality? Like what aspects of myself would I like to be stronger in? And so when I can do that, and have chances and times, you just realize that you're not a victim of the circumstance and you're not a victim of like, I mean, obviously you do need a flexible partner. I mean, that was like Seth, our therapist's like ultimate point. He was like, as long as you're not being inflexible, you guys are good. Yeah. Cause it's all about having the willingness to know these things and be like, okay, I would like to like take a back seat in the planning. Yeah. Like I would really, really appreciate it. I'm feeling like this side of me is always the one being expressed. And I'd really like to take a back seat. Like you can do that. You always have a chance to break a pattern. Yeah. You always can be the one to break a pattern.
Well, that's that whole idea of that Esther said. It's that it takes 2 people to create a pattern, but one person
and one person to break it.
And I feel like I have experienced in my life a lot of inflexible, like partners or friendships where I was like put in the polarized space and I was really uncomfortable there and frustrated there. But I also, in areas there wasn't flexibility for me to grow and evolve. And I feel like there's been times I've like kicked and screamed, like, because I recognize like these are qualities I want to develop in myself, but it's really hard to do that in relationship when the other person doesn't want to be flexible. Yeah.
Anytime there's been a point in my life where I've like kicked and screamed and I've like, it's this. It's literally this. It's been
being put in a
box and saying this is not quite right. People in my life saying you don't really know what you're talking about or suck it up or get over it or whatever. And it's been this, but the thing is I didn't have awareness of this, like of any of this until like the last few years, which is why it feels so important to me, because I think this is like what helps us make changes in our life so that we feel better in our skin. Like truly. Yeah.
So, okay, here's a question I'd like to, so in our, like to maybe give some like more concrete examples, because I feel like that would be good for me and my brain.
Totally.
I want us to maybe see if we can dig for an example of the splitting the ambivalence in, maybe we can even find it in the thinking of like replaying trauma, recreating our trauma, and then also for like what we want to cultivate, what we want, like what we admire. I mean, I know we used our relationship, but like I feel like in my life, I definitely attracted a partner who would save me. because this was like my religious trauma. I was destined for hell and I needed to be rescued by a savior, right? And I couldn't save myself. I mean, that was drilled into me as like a child. You can't save yourself. And so I really think that like in my marriage, I definitely was attracting this idea of a savior, somebody who was going to be my hero, who was going to save me from things. That was replaying my trauma. And it's interesting. And I've talked about it. We've had lots of conversations, Luke and I, about this whole idea, but it definitely like, as that like played out, it created this in me. I felt really small and helpless and things like in my relationship that didn't work. And I was like not happy with myself and how I was showing up in my relationship because this trauma was playing out. And it was really interesting. And it was like, and it's hard to shift out of that. Like it can be really challenging to shift out of that. But that's an example of like me replaying trauma in relationship. And then I do think I also can replay this whole, I don't know, almost this like whole idea of like having my shit together. I think it's something that like I kind of got from my mom. She never really expressed like, she was always strong. Like she never really, like she didn't apologize. She didn't really like, she had so much pressure, I think, on herself to like have the answers and know what to do. And she always showed up in that way. And I think like that translated to me as like, this is what a strong woman is. Like, this is what.
And so it's almost like the more you realize that you didn't have all the answers, that was like conflicting with like what you're supposed to be in the world.
Yeah. Or that maybe was like weakness or something like that. Yeah. And so I do think that especially in friendships, I know we experienced this in the beginning of our friendship, that I would show up in that way. Like I had my shit together. I didn't need to like, I wasn't going to be messy, you know? And I think that's like one thing, cause like, I feel like we've done the paradox so well. Like we've like let ourselves like flex and grow. And really my relationship with you is like one of the first like times that I've really gotten a chance to embody another part that I just had never felt that was available to me, or I didn't allow myself to go to, because I always like played this role. But then with you, I was able to like be messy. You were asking me to, you were like, come on. Like,
I know. I was like,
express
what the
this
fuck?
part of you.
I get so messy in front of you and you are so put together. And I kind of need that to stop.
And I remember you saying
you're
like,
making me
I'm
look
usually
bad.
I remember you saying like, I'm usually the person that like holds space for like my friends to be messy. So you were experiencing like a shift in that paradox as well. I don't know. So those are a couple examples, I think, of like trauma replaying, but also like the parts I admire in people, like attracting that. And then our relationship really embodied, I think, us being able to shift and embody those things.
Oh man, there's so much there. Yeah. The thing that is unique to our friendship for me is that we've been having these conversations and allowing for flexibility almost this entire time that we've known each other. And I think that, and we've gotten better at it. It's been a practice, really. We've gotten better at it. And also a huge part of it is just like loving the parts of each other that we don't necessarily ourselves love, which I think is really huge. But I think that something that I don't know the answer to. I don't know the answer to any of this, but I think about all the time is because what I have done in my life is when I butt up against my partner being inflexible, that's like literally what has ended all of my relationships, is getting to a place where like the core underlying thing, when you like really dig into it, is always been that they have been inflexible in allowing me to grow into parts of myself, because that's been at the end of every relationship, I have said something along the lines of is like, you don't really want me. You want like certain parts of me or an idea of me, and you're not like fully seeing me. And so what I don't know is like, one, I was young and didn't have the vocabulary, the tools or whatever to have these kinds of conversations with my partners. But I don't know, like if you are with someone for like 7, 10, 20 years, or even like also I think a lot about like relationships with like siblings or family, where it's like, you don't choose those people, right? Although you might argue you do. That's like a mystic belief that she has. But I mean, she's not a mystic though. I would never label her.
Yeah, I don't subscribe.
The idea is that I just think it's so fucking hard to change patterns that have been going on for like a decade or more. And I don't,
especially when your environment reinforces it.
And I don't know how you do it. Like it's gotta be, I just know from experience, like I literally like left those relationships, you know, like they had to end because I was like, I don't know how to shift what is going on here. Because it's never been for not like loving them. You know what I mean? It's always been for, this is like not working. And really for a long time, that kind of freaked me out because I was like, will it ever work? You know, you have those doubts. Like, is this ever going to work? And then just to tie it in, not to romantic friendships, because it's our relationships, because it is truly like all of our relationships. It's just so much harder with like siblings and parents to shift these patterns. Like it really is so fucking hard. And I guess I just want to say that because I don't want anyone to feel discouraged. Like it is hard. It's so hard. It's so hard to shift patterns. But I do believe, because this is what we've done, is that it come like the way that you do it is through having first the conversations that create self-awareness, not just in yourself, but in with them. Because I mean, if you're feeling, we've said this so many times before, but I really am just trying to remind myself, like if I'm feeling a certain way, like surely the person in my life is also feeling similarly. And so I think the place to start is by like literally talking about paradoxical relationships, how our personality is contextual, what parts of myself am I showing up as, what am I showing in this relationship? And when you have the vocabulary established, that's like first, and you start thinking about it and you start talking about it, then you can say things like, I feel like I would like to embody more of whatever in our friendship. And I think that's, I don't know, it's just so hard. It really is.
I do think that this whole idea, it kind of might define like this certain frustration that I think a lot of people experience in relationship.
Yes.
Where you feel constricted or frustrated. I mean, I know I've like felt this so many times, but I've never had like words to understand. Like I've just never had words to articulate like why I'm frustrated. And I think it's very much, I was in this polarized place that I knew wasn't all of me. That story that was being told about me, this personality that I had, wasn't all of me. And I wanted to express more of me, but I didn't feel like I had the space to do that.
It's like 100%. I'm just like, that is so like everything that's ever like all the biggest frustrations in my life, I feel like have been that with people.
And I feel like because I do think that there's been like, there was a long period of time where I believed that that was my personality. Like I believed that this polarized place I was in based on my relationships was who I was. And I was frustrated with myself. I felt like disappointed in myself. I felt like really small. And I was like, I don't want to be this way. I want to be more like my partner who gets to embody all of this like assertive freedom, like masculine, whatever. Like I want to be more like that, and like really struggling a lot against not feeling like I had the space to do that, or especially the space to try and fuck up and like practice and fail. Like, because it was always this like one story, you know? And like, and we've talked about it so much, like these stories that we tell ourselves, a lot of them probably are just like rooted in this whole idea that, you know, based on your family, based on your belief systems growing up, you created a personality, which isn't static. Like you are so much more than the story that, oh, I've just always been this way. Cause like the one that I would like, and anybody, like you ask my siblings, you ask my dad or whatever, they would all say the same thing. Emily has her head in the clouds. Like she's like, you know what I mean? She doesn't have both feet on the ground. And I know we like joke about this a lot, but
I know, I'm like, sorry.
To the point of like, no, but to the point of like, almost like she can't. Like she's not capable because she's so like, and I believed that story about myself for a long time.
Yeah.
And like, we actually had somebody post in our Master Your Mindset Facebook group. And I loved the question that they posted about like how to to like build yourself up, you know, when you've been telling yourself this story. And what I said was like, it's like, you have to give yourself these small wins. Like you're not going to go from having this one story you've told about yourself your entire life, relationships that enforce that, to all of a sudden being like this other thing that you admire. You have to like let yourself incrementally. And for me, what I said was like, for me, it's like even these little tech wins like are really important to me. Like the fact that I'm sitting here, my mic is working, my camera's working, the light is on, the fucking situation is happening is like a win for me that is opposing this story that's been told to me and about me and that I tell to myself for my whole life, that like I can't figure this stuff out because I'm too head in the clouds, you know? And these small wins, I think, are what break you out of the static splitting the ambivalence into more of embracing the paradox, both and.
Yes.
Like I can do it all, you know?
Yes. For me, a huge part of pushing back on all this has been like morning routine stuff. Like I cannot look, you can do it a little bit at a time and try and like maintain focus on what you're trying to improve in your life, just kind of like winging it. But I needed more structure. And honestly, I just think that it made it all happen for me so much faster. And what that looks like is, and we go like through this much more in Master Your Mindset, but it's for me, and my morning routine has changed. For me, it's like gratitudes, having intentional time in the morning set where I think about and I write out like what I'm trying to cultivate in myself. Like and so I have all these affirmations. And honestly, my affirmations, I mean, the thing is it's not, I don't really rely on my morning routine like I once did. But my morning routine is such a good tool for me when I'm like really trying to fucking change something. And so those affirmations will be things like, I'm showing up in a way that makes people feel safe with me so that they can be more vulnerable and more authentically themselves. Because that was something that was really important to me. Because I actually used to have people tell me that they thought I was pretty unapproachable. And I was like, ooh, I don't want to be unapproachable. Or maybe I had a really hard time, and sometimes still do. It's getting much better though, at taking things like personally, like especially like when you start putting yourself out online, random people will just say the fucking craziest things to you. And it was really hard and scary at first. And so not taking all that to like heart and having it like rock my like day. Cause sometimes somebody would say something so awful on social media to me and it would like rock me for like an hour. And I would be like, this isn't worth it. I don't want to do this stuff. I don't want to like, I'm done, you know? And I was like, you know what? I don't want to be like knocked down by like a fucking rando on the internet that easily who like, because the things that would upset me are the things that aren't true. You know what I mean? I'd be like, that's not true.
Right. Injustice.
Because it's like the injustice of it all is just like infuriating. But yeah. And so one of my affirmations was like, I don't take things personally because I know that, you know, angry people like lashing out at me or I know that people's like reactions to things are much more a reflection of like whatever's going on in their life. And I would have to repeat, I mean, like it's in my morning routine. I would repeat it, like I would listen to the audio that I would record myself saying it over some binaural beats and I would listen to it. And honestly, the most powerful thing about listening to it every day is that it comes to you so quickly in the moment. So like in that moment, when I'm experiencing this thing, that line that I like have listened to now will just like pop in my mind and it like immediately will calm me down. Or a big one for me was wanting to not feel comfortable in high beta or like in like fight or flight, because that was a thing for me where I realized I'm not uncomfortable there. And so I was like, oh, I'm like kind of addicted to like the drama of chaos and situations that put me in fight or flight. And so it was an actual practice to enjoy feeling calm. Like, you know, like
yes.
I had to be like, I like feeling calm. I like the way meditation feels.
Good for me.
This is good for me. But inside I was like, this is boring as fuck.
Lord, I want to be in crisis.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think people can relate to that because it's hard when like that stuff feels lame. Like it does. Like it did. It felt lame to me. But I was like, I really want to make some big changes in my life and I want to make changes in my life fast. Like, cause that's also how I am. It was that part of my personality that's like, how can I do this as quickly as possible? Because this is boring, lame. I don't want to be doing this shit forever. And I want some like positive, like I want the result, basically. You know,
I want to rise.
I'm like, yeah, I want to be done with this. When am I done with this personal development shit? Like, so yeah. Anyway, that was like all so much of what helped me in integrating this information, because if you're not thinking about it top of mind, like it just takes longer in my experience.
Yeah. It's like the best way to like reinforce these things that you're working on. As you were talking, I was just kind of thinking about like how to, when you are in a scenario, we talk a lot about like this whole idea of like going home for the holidays. That's like a perfect example of like being thrown back into
everything that triggers me.
Yeah. And thrown back into these like polarized relationships that you are being asked because people are expecting you to fill a certain space and they're energetically like pushing you into that space because there's not the flexibility of the paradox in those relationships. And we're all just doing this subconsciously. But like when you're consciously aware of like, oh, I'm being put into the space that I don't fit anymore. It's kind of like, how do we deal with that? Like, how do we, cause like I've actually had different strategies to deal with that at different times and in different environments. There's been times that like, I remember early on when I was like realizing, oh, I'm being put in this space. And anytime I like move out of that space, I just like offend people.
Oh yeah.
Like,
well, because when you're first trying, I just want to say this because it's like really important. When you're first practicing pushing out of like what you've been labeled as, it's awkward as fuck. And you need to give yourself some grace. Because when I did it, I would like lash out at people. Like I would get angry because I'd be like, I'm not that person. Like, and it took practice to like do that with grace and to just kind of like not take it on. And actually a mentor gave me a beautiful like image. She was like, when you experience that level of trigger, when somebody is trying to put you in that box, instead of coming at them like face to face, like assertive, she was like, kind of imagine that you're sitting beside them, like next to them, and you're like having a seat next to them. And you're like kind of like putting your arm around them and you're just like, I see that you struggle with this too. And let me kind of just like look out at the vista of the world and show you like what I'm seeing. I don't know why, but that like actually really helped me a lot because I tend to show up like big and like in your face. Versus like, rather than side by side. Like
same team.
Yeah, same team. Exactly. Sorry, I had to just like, I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought, but
No. That is like, cause like, that's like an example of like you trying to shift so that it's not like so explosive. Like, and I think I didn't like, obviously I didn't go to like fight. Like I didn't put my dukes up.
You're not a fighter.
But I think I'm not a fighter, but I think what I did do is I would feel all stuffy and stuck in my box. And I would like say something like really controversial, or I would that's how I would do it, is I would like cause ripple effects and I would shake the boat, but in that way, as I would just like drop a bomb that people would be like really uncomfortable or like nervous.
I did that too.
And and that's kind of like, because it was just like I felt like I was suffocating, you know, and I had to like, I felt like I needed to just like say something that was like authentic to me. But it was like, it didn't like land well. Like it did. I mean, there are some people that I would be around that were like amused by it, you know, and I definitely did have circles that were amused by it. But I remember an early on a strategy that I had when I realized I was doing that and that actually wasn't helping anything and it was causing people a lot of stress and it wasn't actually like really making me feel better. So what I started doing, I don't know if this is like a good strategy, but before I would go into like a family dinner or a certain event where I knew I was going to be put in a box, I would create like a character. Like I would create a character where I was like, what character could I create where I can interact with these people in a way that they would feel really loved? And I would be like really intentional about that. And so, but it was almost like this like acting job that I would do.
Dude, whatever
where I was
works,
like, well,
man.
if I can't, I was like, if I can't show up like 100% authentic, I'm going to at least entertain myself by like being this character and this character is expressing herself fully, you know? And it was like, honestly, I do think that was a bit of like a survival mechanism, like, cause I just was like feeling like I was drowning in those situations.
It's quite clever, I'll say. I think it's pretty clever.
Yeah. But I do feel like the more I've built relationships in which I can be fully myself, I haven't felt the pressure or need to have to show up. Like when I go home, I can just kind of be in that space. Like for me, I don't feel like a ton of pressure to like, because I can express myself fully elsewhere and I don't feel a lot of flexibility with certain people. But I also don't demand it from them but this is also like, I see my family like once a year. Like I have it's like a very different kind of interaction with those people who might put me in that box. But I do have to say that I feel more comfortable staying there, small doses. Because I don't have to have that from them because I get it elsewhere.
That's important too. Reminding yourself that you don't have to get everything from everyone. You don't have to get all your needs met from everyone. Like when I started thinking that way with like friendships, so helpful. Or just like, I don't need my friends to all be the same. I was actually like talking about it with Ben the other day. I was like, this friend is I'm putting them in boxes. But I'm like, this is like what I get out of this friendship. This is what I get out of this friendship. And it's kind of just different. And that's okay. Like it doesn't all have to feel the same. And I think that relieved a lot of pressure on like what I wanted out of friendships really, and made my life easier just thinking like that. And my family, my family loves to use humor and just like self-deprecating humor in particular to like, when something is like difficult or dark, my family's go-to is to joke about it. Like, which I actually am kind of appreciative of, although it's definitely not healthy sometimes. It's definitely not the healthiest. So what I've started doing actually, because it can be difficult to have these conversations with my family, especially like collectively, tends to make them uncomfortable. But I've started being like joking about how I'm like, well, that's what we do in our family. You do one thing one time and it's like memorable and that's who you are for the rest of your life. You better just live with it. So like last time I was home for the holidays, which by the way was like a huge win because I like don't think I got triggered once. It was nuts. It was so huge and exciting. I was so proud of myself. Anyway, there was a joke where I think I did something. I forget what it was. I like fucked up. We'll just say like one time I like made a dish for like dinner and I forgot to put the sugar in it. And so it was like real gross. It was like carrot souffle and it tasted like chalk because it was just like flour. And everyone was like, and so that's like the joke is Sarah can't cook, doesn't know how to like, don't forget to put the sugar. Oh, can't let Sarah cook this carrot souffle. She'll fuck it up. Like that's just like how my family is. And so I did something this last time along those lines and I was like, oh no, here we go. I was like, add it to the list of personality traits. This is who I am and I'm never going to change. And this is it. And like, so I would like joke like that while I was home. And what happened is people in my family started sharing stories about themselves feeling that way. Even my mom, she told this story about how a friend of hers was like, remember when you were scared of knives? My mom's like a really like excellent chef. And she's like, and I can't stand it because she's always like, remember when you were scared of knives? Remember when you were scared of knives? She was like, that's fucking 15 years ago. Like, ah! And we were all cracking up over dinner talking about these things, joking about like, careful, you break a dish once and you can't do dishes, which that one was a great one. That one worked out, you know? And so that was actually like really nice because it was not something I thought my parents had experienced. And so we all like were joking the whole time I was home about things because actually it was really funny. One really funny one is that there was some joke about how one of my sisters like loves mashed potatoes and tried to like, and would eat all the mashed potatoes. And it actually was like very upsetting for her because she like, you know, I don't know. Anyway, struggles with food and stuff like that. And she just like slammed her like hands on the table. Was like, I don't fucking like mashed potatoes. Wow. And we were like cracking up because we were like, this is clearly a pattern in our family and we all do it to each other. And we're all like suffering under the like the rigidity that we've created as this like family dynamic. And then we were like cracking up about it, and we all had our own stories. Everyone had a story that they were frustrated with about something that we all put them in a box about. And it was so good. But that was like, we didn't fix it.
Yeah.
We didn't fix it. We just joked about it. Right. So it's like, but that's step one. That's step one.
But, right. Because you're bringing awareness to it. Like, can I just say, like, what you did there is so fucking brilliant, because you took something that is like, has caused you pain.
So
like,
much
this
pain.
Is like actively caused you so much pain in your family. And you've worked on yourself enough to not have to, like, you didn't respond in your fight, like trigger, right? But instead you actually were able to speak your family's language through humor to talk about something that's really like important and actually like kind of a big deal. And you gave them all an opportunity to like, because they weren't being triggered, because you weren't angry at them. And so you gave them an opportunity to open up and be like, yeah, I have that too. And now you guys have this like foundation that you all understand, like you have this pattern. And what's going to happen is you're going to continue to talk about it. And it's going to bring awareness to this. It's going to bring so much awareness into like your family dynamic.
That's the hope. No, it was huge. I mean, seriously, I don't often feel proud of myself, but I felt very proud of myself that I was like,
I'm proud of you.
I've never not been triggered when I go home. Normally, like 10 years ago, I go home and I'm like, where's the wine? I just want to like pound wine and like try not to strangle people.
Like, I remember having like SOS, like phone calls of like, I can't fucking take it anymore. Like, I'm going to get on a plane. I'm like freaking out and to hear you like say that you didn't even get, it's huge. And you should be so proud of yourself. Like, that's such a big, and it's a testament to like how much you've grown, like how much growth you have experienced, you know, because this is because of you. It's not, they didn't change really, you know, this is you who's grown and evolved and been able to like hold so much space. It's like incredible.
Yeah. Two things that really helped me in this area is one, remembering that, like, I don't remember where I originally heard this, but it's stuck with me, is something along the lines of like, just knowing that like most conflict, the base like desire is to be understood and seen. Like, if you just like keep peeling back the layers of like, why are you really upset? What's really going on here? Going back and back and back and back. You usually get to a place where you're like, wow, I want you to like actually see me as I am, especially in longer relationships where we tend to like, you know, participate in paradoxical relationships and show up certain parts of ourselves and be really, and then solidify it. And then everybody's in their boxes and everybody has their roles. And if you try and shake that up, then you are fucking everything up and it's uncomfortable. And like, but if you just like remember that like truly everyone's just really trying to feel like understood, loved, and seen, it helps me have so much more empathy. And so I literally tell myself that when something's going on, like that's like one of the reasons I didn't get triggered. When someone in my family was just like, I don't know, maybe behaving in like a really assertive way where I felt kind of overwhelmed by what they were doing, I would in my mind be like, where are they looking for like love? And
what's the need?
What is like the need here? And most of the time it was like to feel appreciated or to feel like their efforts were like worthwhile or to feel, I'm going to cry, or to feel like, you know, they like, I don't know, they didn't quite feel like maybe loved as a kid or safe. That's a huge one. Like they didn't feel safe as a kid. And now they just want to feel like safe and loved in their family. And as you start like noticing things like that, and you don't make it about yourself, because that's the other thing is like, as I've stopped making it about me needing to feel loved and understood, I've gotten less triggered, because that was like when I was my most assertive, my most like in your face, my most angry, my most upset was when I just like needed everyone to like see me as I am. And as I've like released that and tried to just see them as they are, it's like, it's been a fucking game changer. And I forget the other point I was going to make because I went down that rabbit hole really hard.
That was brilliant. I'm glad you went there. That it's so beautiful.
It's just, remembering that most people are just trying to feel seen and understood is like,
I feel like you're really good at that. Like you're good at being like zooming out, you know, like so much we can be so like blinders on and we're just like not actually like consciously aware of what's happening and actually like really in it. We're just like all subconscious, like triggered responses. And you have practiced, and I've seen this like grow so much in you, and you're so good at like zooming out and asking those questions. Like, what is the need here? What is like the subtext that is not coming across right now? And there's always that's always existing all the time. And like practicing knowing it's like a bigger story than just this little narrow pinhole that you're experiencing right now in this argument that you're having with your sister or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
That is so beneficial to like,
that's a practice. I'm glad you said like, talks about that because that's like new, you know, that like this story is like, it's like happening for me right now. And it's taken me years of practicing it. And also just like, having uncomfortable conversations. Like I know it makes some people in my family uncomfortable when I talk about this like stuff or when I say, you know, like, is it because, you know, I'll ask questions like, is it because you like didn't like feel safe? Or is maybe, you know, maybe it's because you kind of always felt criticized and not like fully like loved as you are. And like when I say that, sometimes they're like, what the fuck? But then they think about it. I also want to say that for people who are like, if you want to try and implement some of this stuff, like it's fucking awkward, you know? I've had conversations with like siblings and where they're like, okay, this is uncomfortable. Bye. I'm done. You know, like it's not it's not cute so or pretty or, and it can be quite awkward and uncomfortable and embarrassing. But like truly the end result is so much better. Like it is like so worth it.
Yeah. This like vulnerability, like it's just, and it is really like intimate. It's super scary to do. It's interesting though. I've been thinking actually a lot about my relationship with vulnerability, like in regards to all of this, the relationships you have with other people. And because I do think that like, yeah, like this whole idea that you're talking about, like how like awkward and uncomfortable and stuff it is.
And you might get triggered and angry. Actually, like I was so awkward. Oh my God. Anyway, sorry.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of how to describe this. I feel like I have existed in this world of like being so much more comfortable in those intense, vulnerable situations. I've started realizing that like isn't super normal. Like, so it's really interesting to me to hear you talk about that because I'm sitting here being like, oh no, that's not awkward and weird for me. Like that's actually like really comfortable for me to like go for that.
But the way you are in this way is like what has like given me permission to be. That's why I think I'm talking about how it's awkward and vulnerable because I'm like, this comes naturally for you and you are comfortable there because it feels real to you, I think.
Well, no, I actually think it's a trauma response.
Oh.
Like this is like I actually like am thinking like this is what it is. I actually was recently having a conversation about this. Again, it's religious trauma because like my whole brain is fucked up because of that. But because I was told that I'm sinful and there's this like heavy weight on like confessing your sins or being like, you know, like you have to repent for your sins. So I'm like a kid, I'm like 8 and I'm being asked to like repent for my sins. And I remember like thinking like, I don't think I've ever done anything bad. Like I just like, there was that one time I didn't clean the cat litter. Like this is like, these were my thought processes. And so I was like almost like being forced to create stories about myself and it was almost this like non-consensual vulnerability. I was like being like asked to be vulnerable and to like flay myself open and to like try to conjure up some like sinful, awful thing about myself. And what that did, like having a childhood experience of like these like altar call, like stuff, what it created in me was this fear of if I am not fully vulnerable and exposing myself all the time, there's going to be some like dark hidden sin. And then I'm going to go to hell because of it.
what the fuck? Because this is like something that I'm like, oh, this is because you are like really enjoy being like real and
you're
authentic.
so well adjusted.
Yes.
No, just fucked up. Just so fucked up.
Or you're destroying the box I put you in and I don't like it.
So I think that's where it stemmed from. Like it actually was stemmed from fear that like I have to be vulnerable. Like that's the only way that I'll actually be loved.
Look,
is if I am fully vulnerable all the time with everybody.
Look, here's the thing though. This is a good example of how sometimes good shit comes out of trauma responses. Good stuff comes out.
Okay.
No, seriously. Yeah. It's not all bad. It really isn't. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, like, okay, here's one. Because I've thought a lot about this because, like, okay, in the 12 steps, you go through this thing where you list out all the, like, hard shit that happened in your life. Then I'm summarizing. And then you find your role in it, which is difficult because a lot of times you're like, no, like, what the fuck? They did that thing to me. That's why it's so horrible. I didn't have a part, but you have to find your part in it. Even if it's being naive, even if it's expecting them to act a different way. It's difficult. And then after that, you have this whole list of personal defects is what they call them, like character defects, which I think is a really harmful phrase.
Totally.
Because it's like, because this is like where I came to be like, that's like a harmful phrase because those things, they're ultimately your protectors and they're ultimately things that you did to survive and they're not all bad is the thing. And that's what I've discovered is like a slight flaw in that whole process. But I do think it's good because it helps you really look at like your shadow parts, the parts of you that are not so good. And I think that that's really powerful because what happens is you get a real clear picture of yourself and your tendencies to do kind of fucked up things because we all have them in certain situations so that you can see them clearly. And so that then the thing that's really powerful about owning your shit is that then you know what's yours. So like you're in a conflict with somebody or you're having a less than desirable situation, you're like, yeah, I got quite self-righteous in that moment. Or yeah, I can tend to be like kind of vain or something like that. And then that makes it easier when people like try to like reflect their shit on you, where you can be like, yes, that is something I do. Like, thank you for pointing it out. Or no, that's actually not mine. Like, I know that that's not mine. And it gives you like a greater sense of confidence and self-worth. And I think it's really powerful and often like kind of skipped in a lot of personal development. It's like the hard shit. It's the hard like work. And so anyway, in that process, I uncovered that I have like a level of like vanity. But the thing is like when you call it a character defect and it's only bad, you miss the fact that like that vanity or that part, that like, trauma response actually saved my ass quite a few times. Like it prevented me from being homeless and drinking, because I got like my rock bottom had a higher bottom, I think, because of my vanity, because I was not going to be like, you know what I mean? So like, it's just like so fucking important, I think, to remember that even these parts of ourselves that come out and our trauma responses, and like, that's like one of my favorite fucking things about you is the way in which you don't really have very many superficial conversations. Like, I feel like I can like name them because they stand out as being really funny. Like when we went down that Shia LaBeouf like rabbit hole watching YouTube and just like shoving like snacks in our face. But like most of our conversations are like these. And so, and to hear you say it's a trauma response, I'm like, you know what? Like, thank God for that trauma response because I fucking love that that part of you. I do. And I don't like that is how you get like a whole picture of yourself and the people around you, is remembering that there are very, very, very few things that are entirely good and entirely bad.
Yeah.
Like there's so much fucking nuance to everything. And our brains are just not great at that. Our brains are meant to categorize things and put them in a nice, neat little box because that's how we are able, like, that's how we move through the world safely, and it's how we move through the world safely. And it's how we don't spend every fucking waking second of our day, like analyzing every like interaction, because you have to some extent categorize it so you can move on with your life, so you can move on and have interactions, simplify and like it's just like necessary. You lose your fucking mind.
Right.
And sometimes it makes me feel crazy because I feel like my brain could do a little bit more of that. Wouldn't life be so much more simple and easy? You could just come home, sit in a lazy boy, drink Bud Light, watch reality TV and fucking call it a day. That'd be great.
Yeah. Bliss. Yeah. I love everything that you just said. And it is a good reminder because I think we can sometimes, we're our own worst critics. So I can sometimes be like, it's good to remind myself that these qualities about me that maybe I like know comes from so much pain and fear, but knowing that like my like compulsive, like invasive vulnerability has given other people permission to be vulnerable in a way that's like been really good for them. And it's like, also though, I have my work to do. Like I get to give myself permission to not be vulnerable. Like that's my work, is that I don't have to share with this whoever all the things, and I can hold some things in, and that's okay. I'm not going to get like smote by God.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, the complexity of all of it, and in giving ourselves permission to be the paradox, right?
Yes.
To like do both and, right?
Because more often than not, I've seen that side of you when you interact with people. They find like relief in you. Like you are like a relieving person to be around, because more often than not, people are like craving to be that vulnerable. And the amount of times I've seen you like interact with a new friend of mine or something, and I'm just like, there they go, talking about their like moms.
And afterwards I'm like, was that okay?
Yeah. I'm like, it's been 2 minutes. And there they are talking about childhood shit. I love this woman so much. Yeah. So more often than not, I think it's like, I really do think it's like a beautiful thing. And it's like one of your strengths. And so that's just, I love this so much because it's a perfect way to wrap up with like being comfortable knowing that contradictory beliefs, personality traits, which I hate to say because those are so dynamic and not fixed. And like even your defects, like character defects, whatever, there's just so few of them that are all inherently bad or all inherently good. Like it's so much more juicy and like delicious than that. And I love it.
Yeah. And I think thinking about all of us and whoever's like watching and listening, like the parts that you want to embody, like what are the character traits or whatever that you want to embody, that you want to practice? Who represents that in your life? How can you cultivate that in your life, you know? And then getting clear on like, what space are you in that you don't really like fit in anymore, but you're being asked to like remain in that space. And then also, especially like, I love this like one little bit, and I know Brene and Esther get into it, but it's like the quality about somebody that you're in relationship with that might be like frustrating
I love
or
that
something to you because it's like opposing. It's like it's the splitting the ambivalence. They're filling the other space. Them representing the other half allows you to be the adventurous one, the spontaneous one, the whatever like thing that you love about yourself and you love to embody in this relationship. Them embodying the other half gives you permission to do that, you know? And it's like, and sometimes you can be like really frustrated with the other person. Like, why aren't you more like me? And it's because they're balancing the scale. And like, and I think having appreciation and love for that is like, huge, you know?
Totally. And I think that's actually a good practice we can kind of like leave everyone with is when the character traits that drive you nuts about your friends and family and romantic partners, like try and just have like a mental experiment where you're like, what is it? Like, what is the other side of that coin? Like, what does that allow me to do? What do I clearly on some level, like some subconscious level, appreciate about that character trait? But not only that, the other thing I love to always ask is like, what does that lend to in other parts of their personality that I do like love and appreciate, you know, because there's always that too, like that side of someone, like that side of, I don't know, that like I'm trying to think of an example. That side of you that like tends to get really vulnerable. I mean, like that's the perfect example where you're like, it's a trauma response and it's caused me some pain because sometimes I go too deep with people and it makes them uncomfortable. It's like literally one of the parts that I love the most about you. And there's always that. There really is. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, if I were to eliminate like Ben's methodical way of like processing things, like that would eliminate so many other pieces of him that I like really love and appreciate. Like it's just like so much more like intertwined and dynamic than and and it's hard to remember like as you're moving throughout the day. Like I'm not constantly remembering this, and that's the practice, is trying to be like, reminding yourself this stuff. So
that it's fluid, it's flexible, it's not fixed, like, and getting really curious and noticing when you're experiencing frustration because you're expecting something to be fixed and it's not falling into your plan. And then that's stressing you out, and like, how can we embrace the paradox more,
And you don't need that person's permission to start showing parts of yourself. Like you're not like remembering I'm not a victim. Like if I want to start being more of this, it might help to be like, look, I'm practicing this. I'm practicing not being this way, or I'm practicing being this way. Just so you know, when I'm awkward in this like particular area, that's what's going on. That's another thing that you can like absolutely do. You don't need their permission. You don't need them to change to start like pushing back on that shit. You will. I mean, that's why I think so many people, and I kind of hate this a little bit, but like a lot of personal development, like gurus love to be like, when you start doing a lot of personal development, you're going to lose like friends and family. And like, especially like the hardcore entrepreneurs, like you're going to become an entrepreneur and you're going to shift all your way of thinking. You're going to alienate and it's going to be lonely and hard, but worth it. Like you hear that sometimes in the like personal development world. And I'm just like, I mean, maybe if there's a particular person who's super toxic and unwilling to look at themselves. But I think more often than not, you changing is going to like inherently shake up the patterns, and they're going to be forced to change. And maybe you guys come to the conclusion that you're not meant to be together because of that. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Like, I really do think that just like calling out all of this stuff and saying, like talking about paradoxical relationships and the tendency to like put someone in a box, like just having awareness in that area, like, it's just step one. And I just don't think that we need to lose as many people as people I think people love to glorify that a little bit.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be that binary. Like it can be like, that's the whole thing we're talking about, that we don't experience any static, like binary, anything. Everything is like a fluid paradox. And like the more we can embrace that and allow people to grow, like just like what you did with your family this Christmas, like you could have, back when it was hard, been like, I'm never seeing them again, and then it wouldn't have given you this opportunity to like evolve. Right. And I mean, this isn't to say that like boundaries are really important, and actually boundaries allow you to like grow with people who maybe are difficult or it's hard. But yeah, I don't think it has to be as binary as like,
that's the hard part about having these conversations together with people in your life, but also like in public, because when you talk about things that are this nuanced and talk about things that you're like actively kind of processing out loud in front of a group of people, you have to like remember that it is inherently nuanced and dynamic and complex. And so what becomes the problem is, and like having these public conversations, is then you're having to be like, that's not like, you have to like qualify. That's not to say that you don't need boundaries. That's not to, we got to come up with all the exceptions.
It's exhausting.
There are toxic people. You should leave an abusive relationship, like blah, 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 blah.
Addendum.
Yes. It's just like exception. Here we go. Like, let me list all the because the thing is people will hear conversations like this or other people's conversations along these lines and then be like, yeah, well, this doesn't relate to me because of X, Y, and Z. And it's like, this totally. Literally, you have to approach all of this with the like understanding that it's complex, nuanced, dynamic, ever changing. And that's just the fucking way life is. And I know that our brains don't like that because it's like harder, but this is life.
This is life. This is
and
it.
scene.
Ta-da.
Ta-da.
We solved life. It's complicated. That's the answer.
We know nothing and it's complicated. Thank you for coming to our show. Thank you for coming to our TED Talk.
Our TED Talk. I love it.
I love it.
This is good.
I love you so much.
Mm-hmm.
I love all your
you.
weird things. And
I like your
I'll
weird
never
things.
call you a mystic again. I'm sorry. Forgive me.
No, it's okay. It's both and mystic and.
Well, you're a mystic compared, like when you put you side by side with me. You know what I mean? You put you.
But then, it's interesting.
You put you with like, there's some other mysticky people that you would put next to you, and you would be the scientist.
Right. And I feel like you've even experienced being in relationships where you were the mystic.
Oh, yeah.
Like you were the one embodying that. And I love it. I just love it. And so I'm okay being the mystic in our relationship.
When I try out being the mystic, like I mentioned manifesting to a friend the other day, and it was so awkward. I was like, have you ever thought about manifesting? I mean, I totally know that sounds really weird and kind of crazy and but maybe if you just fuck. That's what it looked like.
Never mind.
It's literally what it looked like, me trying to be a mystic. She was like, okay.
I love it.
But I'm going to keep trying because I like it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's brought value. So that's all I can do.
Mm-hmm.
Love you.
Okay. Love you. Till next time.
Till next time. Bye, guys.
Bye.